right, everybody, welcome back to In Progress. This is our weekly roundtable discussion of the political stories and issues and ideas that are top of mind for progressive folks all across the Lone Star State this week. I'm Chris Mosier. I'm the communications director here at Progress, Texas. What we like to do is amplify progressive values and leaders and actions via our major digital network, which includes social media and podcasts and legacy media contributions and a whole bunch more. We reach millions of people all across Texas all the time. This week, I'm joined by Executive Director Kathleen Thompson. Hi, KT.
Hey, folks.
And here's Digital Manager Haley Smith. Hi, Haley.
Hi.
And Advocacy and Development Coordinator Tatum Owens. Hi, T.O.
That me, bello.
When I call you T.O., I think of Terrell Owens, who really is the original T.O., but I digress.
Unrelated.
I've got football on the brain. So, but let's get to this here. Lots and lots of promises that are being thrown around this campaign season by every single politician who's out there doing their thing. One of whom is, of course, Governor Greg Abbott, who is on the ballot coming up in November. Governor Abbott would like to become, somebody correct me on this stat if you have to, the longest serving governor in Texas history. And whereas he, I think, is already the longest serving governor in the United States out of all these here 50
That's
states.
Correct.
Yes, correct.
I'm pretty sure that
Unfortunately for us, you are correct.
It is what it is. The people have a chance to speak, of course, coming up in November. And that's what we're talking about here in two particular areas. This election season, progressive folks and Democrats have, tried to lean into, we got to talk about the economy. We got to talk about jobs. We got to talk about the cost of gas and the cost of groceries. And all of those things, of course, are very much central to all of our lives. And that's the reason that Democrats want to stick to those talking points. However, there are two major issues that have very much dominated the election conversation these days. One of them is data centers and the wanton spread of them all across Texas, willy-nilly, with all sorts of financial and environmental and all sorts of reasons to oppose them, and which is why so many people do. And we also have the situation that's happening in Big Bend National Park, which is also something that very much a bipartisan, cross-sectional bunch of Texans are against the idea of bulldozers bulldozing Big Bend National Park. It's something that just about zero anybody would really like to see happen. And on both of those particular topics, both of which Governor Greg Abbott has had at least some hand in allowing to happen, he is backtracking on both of those issues as the election rolls up. And we want to kind of cover the idea. First, can we trust Governor Abbott not to just get past the election and get back to business? Second of all, could Governor Greg Abbott actually do much about either one of these situations, both of which are very much tied up in contracts and money and on and on? So Tatum, I'd like to go to you first, and let's go to the Big Bend first. That's kind of been the more recent kind of spiking topic here. From your perspective, for folks who don't know too much about it, in very much a quick nutshell, the situation in Big Bend National Park and what Governor Abbott has said about it.
Yeah, and Chris has a lot to talk about here today, so I'll give a quick summary. If you have not been following, and I hope that you have, my algorithm is certainly pushing me that way. Many advocates have been in this coalition called No Big Bend Wall for going back until April. I think there was a rally at the Capitol, and that's because they're trying to build a border wall through one of our only two national parks. And the surrounding region, of course, but people are focusing on the national park because there are so many dollars attached to this in government contracts, like record-breaking amounts. And that is, as Chris noted, in hand with Governor Abbott allowing this to happen. So millions of Texans have come together to say, do not bulldoze this extremely unique biodiverse ecosystem. Do not bulldoze through a mountain that has been sacred for years before any of the Texans who are there protesting today came before them. Countless other reasons, even if the environment is just one of your top issues as an advocate. Big Bend needs to be protected, and we are seeing bulldozers show up in the last month. And of course, there's a recent pause that Governor Abbott decided to take claim of while just after going to a Buc-ee's in San Marcos. I don't know if y'all saw that. It bothered me that he hasn't even shown up to Big Bend. His press conference took place in Waco. Like, he couldn't even bother himself to show up there, but he could show up at a Buc-ee's and chop some some brisket.
That is silly.
Anyway, I digress
silly
on that, but that's the summary. That's where we are.
Kathleen, give us your take on what Governor Abbott has said. As Tatum alluded to there, he made a big claim that he had extracted a major commitment from Mark Wayne Mullen, who, of course, is the head of the DHS these days. And, of course, Customs and Border Patrol is heavily involved in all this, too. Kathleen, do you believe what the governor is saying he wants to do about all this Big Ben stuff?
No, of course not. Greg Abbott has shown us year after year who he really is. And if he cared about a treasure for all Texans, he would have been speaking up long before, a couple months before early voting starts, right? So why is the Trump administration seeking to build in Big Bend? They say because it's to combat illegal border crossings. But of the border crossings that have happened in this area, we're talking about according to time.com, Once Upon a Time, Time Magazine, for folks Chris's age and my age. But of the migrant encounters along the entire U.S.-Mexico border last year, we're talking about 1.3, like the number 1.3% of all encounters happened at Big Bend. So on its face, it makes no sense. Greg Abbott should have been saying, yeah, I know you want to have a way to pay back your big time donors, boss. Could you take that to a blue state? I mean, right? I mean, how easy would that have been for him to say that instead of my red state? And by the way, I'm on the ballot this election year, so please don't, step on any toes. But Abbott didn't say that. And it makes no sense unless it's about corruption. But Governor Abbott could be advocating for Texas, saying, we don't need that here. We have a natural barrier in the mountains. 1% is not an emergency. It's not even 2%, literally. So Greg Abbott and our land commissioner could all be in Trump's ear saying, hey, not here. And could have been saying that in the spring. But now they're reading poll numbers. That's what Greg Abbott is reading. He's not had a change of heart about what's happening at Big Bend, and pictures of the destruction, bulldozers coming in have not swayed him. It's the poll numbers that he's reading about his race with the Democrat Gina Hinojosa.
I mean, how could he not be, right? If I were a Republican in Texas, I'd be feeling the heat too. I mean, people are mad, and they should be. I feel like there's a Republican rhetorical reflex of fear mongering and scare tactics of this country is going down the toilet, so we need to do this and we need to do this now. And it's you've been in office for a decade.
Exactly.
You would think that maybe some of the problems that everyday Texans are having would be solved with you in office, but it doesn't seem to be the case. And so you have millions of dollars in this clearly corrupt contract. And in the Texas Tribune article that you linked in the Daily Dispatch, Chris, I was reading it, and one of the things that stuck out to me the most, and this is going into the AI and the data center stuff that we'll talk about later, but he said, first of all, this quote was crazy. I was told by the secretary that there would be no construction of any kind. It's that doesn't really seem, that's kind of lukewarm. But then he follows up by saying, oh no, we can use technology like drones to secure the border. That to me is an entirely separate and even more terrifying outcome of technological surveillance on our national parks. That's scary, right?
You might think, some might argue that might be a less environmentally impactful way to approach it.
Sure, but still so invasive.
Right. From that angle, I would be able to maybe entertain all that. But the fact of the matter is, while Governor Abbott is making these proclamations, and very specifically, he's saying, we're not going to build a wall. We're not going to build, this big, super tall steel infrastructure necessarily, which I don't really believe that either, but that's what he's saying. While he's saying that bulldozers are on the roll through the park, it's happening as he's saying these things. And so, it's instantly discredited. And as Kathleen talked about a second ago, to me, when you see the government doing things that seem to make no sense, that's a perfect time to follow the money, of course. And so at this point, it makes sense to go back and kind of decode, and we'll do this also with data centers here in a moment, But to decode how the Big Bend mess got started, this all goes back to that one big, beautiful bill that passed. And we have another name for it that we use on Progress Texas that we can't use on
yes,
the radio.
we can. We can say the one big BS bill.
There you go. Good job, Kathleen. Excellent. Excellent sidestepping. So the big, beautiful bill, as we recall, was a whole bunch of stuff with billions and billions of dollars worth of stuff that was crammed through in one gigantic. When you put that much money and that much stuff and that much information into one bill and everybody signs it once and it's out the door, you can count on the fact that there's going to be problems. There's going to be blowback. There's going to be a lot of this stuff that wasn't thought through very well. And this Big Bend situation appears to be one of those things. Let me throw in real quick too, and let's all remember this, that one way that the big, beautiful bill passed as well as it did, the big BS bill, I should say, was the fact that Sylvester Turner's seat was still vacant at that time because Governor Greg Abbott drug his feet on calling a special election to fill that seat. And so the Dems were down at least one vote, if not two, actually. I think there was maybe another vacancy that I'm trying to think of from another state. Anyway, that thing passed. Part of that was a massive amount of construction contracts that were set to go into the Big Bend. There were several companies, including Southwest Valley Constructors Corporation, Barnard Construction, Fisher Sand and Gravel, and Tierra Right-of-Way Services, each of whom scored, I'm pretty sure, no bid contracts, by the way, of around or upwards of $1 billion for all of those, each one of those companies, to do what is now happening in the Big Bend. And so, again, massive amount of legislation is crammed through, massive amounts of money tied through it without a whole lot of oversight. Suddenly we have ridiculous things happening in the Big Bend that nobody really wants to happen outside of the people who are now getting very, very rich because it's happening.
Of course, around that same time, we saw a push from many Republican lawmakers to sell off public lands as well. And coming from Texas, which has more than any other state, comparatively, the most amount of private land, it is extremely alarming that one of the only national parks that's public land would then be sold off, essentially, in another way, to be built over. And that's why it's been significant to see, as part of this growing statewide coalition, an emphasis on landowners as part of this coalition. You have a lot of, well, for one thing, bipartisan support. So it's crossing party lines, but also, I would say, across classes, you're seeing Texans come together to say, this is a national treasure. This is a treasure for the state of Texas. And I have my own concerns as a private property owner around the area, for sure, but also this is something that should be protected. And so I think going back to that climate that we were in a year ago, it was this time, summer 2025, when this bill was being proposed, and there was still so much outrage at where we are today. You could see where this was going to bring us, and Governor Abbott had opportunities all across the way to say, I protect this national park here in my state. I think that birds are important. Whatever your thing is, like, birders from across the country come to Big Bend because it has a very outstanding area for that. But I digress,
Sure.
I guess.
It's mystical. It's one of a kind.
Exactly.
As you said at the beginning, Tatum, it's super unique. It's a one of a kind place. It ain't for everybody, I'll tell you that. You know, it's not the most comfy place in the world. As Bill Holston said last week on In Progress, everything out there wants to stick you or sting you or bite you. Let me say this: if you love Texas barbecue, if you love Texas chili, this place is the epicenter of that sort of culture. The chili cook-offs and the barbecue cook-offs that happen around Terlingua. The Big Bend National Park is very, very central to Texas identity, which is something that Governor Greg Abbott either doesn't understand, maybe he's still focused on barbecue sauce instead of barbecue culture. But at this point, he is failing to recognize that this is a cultural affront to all Texans, that this is happening in Big Bend National Park.
We know that for that $3 billion awarded to Barnard Construction, those folks, the chairman and his wife contributed $1 million to Donald Trump. So we're talking about follow the money. Doing some research for our recording today, I came upon a nonprofit 501c3 organization that I did not know about before, called Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility. And I found their press release about the big air quotes pause that's happening at Big Bend with the bulldozers, and they are saying they want to see how the contractors were selected. You talked earlier about no bid contracts, what role political connections played in that contracting process, kind of like the reflecting pool, right? How the administration determined that the projects were necessary, and why very normal environmental and public oversight requirements were waived. And their press release says, quote, "Border development in and around the Big Bend National Park should not be a blank check for politically connected contractors. Before another dollar is spent or another acre is disturbed, the administration should explain why taxpayers are paying billions to stop illegal immigration in one of America's least crossed, most unique landscapes." Amen, plus one on all that. It's so important to follow the money, and I'm sure that the administration will say that this is more fake news, but it is good news that the public outcry got DHS staff here to, air quotes again, observe. We don't know what will come of that, but the public outcry that's a bipartisan outcry and the national outcry has made a difference, and people speaking up and rallies at the Capitol and rallies in the community and talking to your member of Congress, et cetera. It has worked, for now, we hope.
So all this reminds me, and I don't want to draw a direct parallel necessarily, but we've had folks talking about the idea recently that we're going through a phase in American history where there are far too many of us, private citizens who are seeing opportunities to cash in on this corruption that we're talking about. The first folks that pop to mind are ICE agents who, each of them are pretty much American citizens. Some of them former soldiers, some of them former police officers or whatever, but a great many of them are just dudes who decided to sign up and go kick ass somewhere. And so in my mind, there's a slight overlap between those people and the people who are driving these bulldozers. I mean, at some point, you do have to stand up for what it is that you did, for whatever reason you did it, even if it was for a paycheck. Just because you're getting paid well and just because your boss told you to is not a good reason to be doing something that you know damn well you should not be doing. And so there's some overlap there that I think we will have to reckon with at some point. So let's segue to our other major complaint lately out in Electionville these days, which of course is the data center situation. In a very, very similar way, Governor Greg Abbott has declared suddenly that he is going to stand up against this gigantic mountain of environmentally damaging grift that he himself has constructed. Governor Greg Abbott has put up with what our friends at Public Citizen, and I got confused about this earlier, by the way, with both the Big Bend thing and the data center thing being paused, so to speak, by Greg Abbott. Got a little confused about that. Our friends at Public Citizen came up with the perfect term for the data center pause, which is the faux pause, FAUX pause. And what Adrian Shelley and the folks at Public Citizen have said is that basically Governor Abbott not only has no intention of actually putting the brakes on data centers, but that he very well may not be able to, due to the fact that so much money has changed hands, so many tax abatements and so many contracts have changed hands, very much similar to what we see in the Big Bend. This is a mess that has already been made that is going to be very, very difficult to unravel. So Kathleen, if you don't mind, would you give us kind of the basics on how the data center mess got made?
Data centers promised will come to your community and will provide jobs, and it will be great for our pocketbooks, but also for your community. And the welcome mat was rolled out, and Greg Abbott has touted their businesses coming to Texas and how exciting it is that different corporations want to come to Texas. Of course, a lot of those corporations want to come to Texas because there are few protections for those communities. And Greg Abbott and some others might like to call those, red tape regulations, but really those are protections for our roads that we as community members must take to work and to get our kids to school. And the water and wastewater that our community is equipped to handle. And of course, with data centers, there are environmental problems and harm to nearby livestock and nuisance sounds, the roads, the water, the infrastructure, the nuisance of the sound and the peace and quiet and your pursuit of happiness in your own backyard. To sit out with your little garden if you've got one, or your green space if you're in an apartment or townhome. The red carpet was rolled out before I think due diligence was done on the governor's part to know what these impacts really would mean. And that's why folks are finding out that their city council meets on the second and fourth Tuesday of the month, and, getting their kiddos with a sitter or bringing their kids in tow and going to city council meetings and saying, like, don't allow this in our state. They're going to build what here? Or if something is already built, then saying we need to rein this in right now before it gets worse.
All of this dates really back to the Rick Perry era. There's one particular bill that was passed in 2013, House Bill 1223, which started this sales tax abatement situation that the data centers have been able to take advantage of. It offered a 100% sales tax exemption on equipment and electricity to draw major infrastructure projects to Texas. If you think about, what was the state of AI in 2013? It didn't exist yet. This was basically, computational centers that would have been on a much, much, much smaller scale, and really no big deal. Since then, we've all seen the explosive growth of AI and how fast explosive and accelerating growth of AI, in fact, and its infrastructure has grown physically along with this tax abatement. So the cost of this tax break to our state budget that started, again, before Governor Abbott's time, Governor Abbott, the longest serving governor in the state or in the country, even before he was in office, it has now gone from around 5 million or so, about million with an M, which is, chump change in state money terms, is now well over $1 billion and will continue to exponentially skyrocket. This stuff is all written into, the situation. And so, Haley, back to you. And once again, what do we think about Governor Abbott's true intentions to actually do anything about this? And do we think he can do anything about it, even if he wanted to?
I think he always can do something. I think he's the governor of Texas. He has not only a responsibility, but he absolutely can do something. Even if this train has clearly gone off the tracks a little bit, you can't really unring this bell. I think he can and should do what's best for the people of Texas, because that's what he's elected to do, period. I think one of my biggest frustrations that I have with just Texas politics in general is that there's very much a conflation, and this is just the trickle-down economics of it all, but like, what's good for business is what's good for people. Clearly, that is not true. Billions and billions of dollars being literally down the drain for infrastructure projects that maybe, 10 years ago, it could have been a good idea to invest in, but there's no job return on this.
Right.
People hate it. I don't know if you guys have seen, actually, I've been seeing all over Twitter, Jason Kelsey just did an ad for Liquid Death, I think, and you mail pee to data centers. That's the concept of it. You mail your own pee to a data center.
I'm sorry to say that I know about that.
Wow, I hadn't seen
that.
that.
You're an Eagles household,
but also, yes, we're an Eagles household, and I see his content still from his days on.
Oh my God.
America's favorite teams.
That is
social media.
But let me throw in a little caveat here, especially for the radio listeners out there. We do not advocate mailing pee to anyone. This is something that Jason Kelsey clearly is into, but we're just relaying the information at this point.
Just letting you guys know, people have free will. You can do whatever you want.
By the way, nor do we advocate cutting down flock cameras. We would never encourage you to cut down flock cameras, although we do understand that those things come down pretty easy with a sawzall.
I saw a guy on Instagram, I think yesterday, who just was gurgling water at a flock camera. It is these little acts of just nothingness that, fair enough. That argument, Haley, about, you have free will, that extends to Governor Greg Abbott, who has used his political power and also his financial power as an extremely wealthy Texan who has made lots of money with his political power, I'll say, to oust people who put laws into place just like these tax exemptions, right? We saw the 3 E's, they all connect: the economy, education, and environment. We've already talked about how environment and money connect, the economy and education. We saw Governor Abbott oust, I don't remember the number, but how many of the Republican lawmakers that didn't agree with his voucher scam. And so clearly he
over
can
a dozen of them.
yeah, there's electoral power that he can enact at any point with his PACs and his allies there. So if he really did care about data centers, as he is supposing in his moratorium, then I think that you would see action on that. But instead, as Chris has noted, this is a faux pas. This is a faux pause. He is not invested in pulling back on data centers. And it's pretty clear that he's invested a lot of time and energy in bringing this infrastructure to Texas, putting us just second to Virginia with expectations that we will supersede them by 2030. And there's our grid. There's the environmental part of it. And we know that our grid has failed. And that is a decade of Greg Abbott deciding not to connect us with the national grid, or to emphasize to our lawmakers that this is an important and life-saving measure that we can take at any point to connect. Of course, Greg Casar has put forward legislation advocating for that. But we know that our grid it does not have the capacity to take in the infrastructure that comes with these data centers at present. So imagine with the growth that is expected in just the next 5 years, I think it's like quadrupling the amount of energy that our grid will require.
Not until somebody writes a bigger check.
Absolutely. And let's bring this all back as we begin to wind down to a very, very basic idea. I think we would all like to at least be able to give the benefit of the doubt to any politician who is making promises about what he or she will do if they're elected. We would all like to be able to believe what these people are promising us that they will do in exchange for our vote. However, in Texas, and this is just to be very, very, technical and clear about it, we've been under control of the Republican Party for 3 decades now. And so whether it's Big Bend, whether it's data centers, whether it's any other problem, public education, whether it's the economy, whether it's the Christian nationalist situation that we see everywhere, any of these problems all have developed under the same set of managers over the last 30 years. And so at this point, I think it's reasonable for any person to perhaps, be a little doubtful about promises that are being made for dramatic change by the people who have set the conditions under which we live. It just doesn't make any sense to expect them to have some kind of big, huge dramatic change of heart. I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just saying, when the people who've been running the show for a long time are promising huge changes, it's just maybe a little bit difficult to buy.
If I can give like a 15-second anecdote that this just reminded me of, I was on the phone with my sister. Sorry, Maddie, for sharing this on the radio. I was on the phone with my sister, who she keeps trying to go back to her ex. And then I'm just like, okay, it's been a year. We do not need to do this. We know what the past has provided us. That is the only information we actually have. Why would we go back to what we know did not work instead of trying something new?
What's the fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, won't get fooled again? Isn't that
that's what Bush in his infinite wisdom said.
Yep, George W. Bush. Okay. Thanks, guys, very much for another terrific talk. Tatum Owens and Kathleen Thompson and Haley Smith. My name is Chris Mosier, and this has been In Progress. Progress Texas amplifies progressive values, leaders, and actions. While campaigns come and go, we're the permanent home for progressive media and action in the Lone Star State. Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Whether you're hearing us on Texas Public Radio or on the podcast feed here, more information about everything we do, you can find at progresstexas.org.